Hey guys, tonight we're going deep into the dust and decadence of ancient Sumer, to a place where palm trees sway over mud brick walls, where ziggurats watch the stars for divine gossip, and where dinner isn't just a meal, it's a sacred performance. You're not just watching history tonight, you're in it. Welcome to city of kings, cows, curses, and cooking fires. You trudge in past the last low blaze of sunlight, brushing off the powdered road dust that's already settled onto your tunic. Reeds rustle softly behind you, canal waters glint like hammered silver, and somewhere nearby, a cow makes the weirdest noise you've ever heard. It's not sick, it's just Sumerian. The smell of earth, onions, and date syrup hits you all at once. It's not unpleasant, it's just confusing. And tonight, you're helping prepare a feast in one of the temple gardens. Not a casual potluck either. This one's for the goddess Ningal, consort of Nana the moon god. The big deal kind of feast. Royal scribes, high priestesses, astronomer priests, market elites, even that guy who always insists his olives are divine gifts. You're the help. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is where you're listening from. I'm genuinely curious how far this temple party reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. First order of business, the barley grind. You're given a flat stone and a larger curved one and told, rather unhelpfully, to make flour until it sings. You're not sure what singing flour is, but your knees are already dusty, your shoulders are working overtime, and the woman next to you is humming some hymn about a goose that stole a priest's hat. You nod, like that makes sense. A boy scampers by with a jug almost the size of his torso. You smell beer. Raw, cloudy, and thick, with floating chunks of fermenting grain. It's not for drinking yet. It's for soaking loaves that will later be toasted and dipped in onion honey oil. You won't be eating any of that unless you really impress the garden steward. The feast isn't just about food. Everything is ritual. The grinding of grain mimics the grinding of cosmic time. The cutting of leeks represents the slicing away of chaos. The laughter of servants, supposed to please the spirits. You're not sure yours is pleasing anyone, but you do laugh nervously when a fat date beetle lands in your hair. Nearby, temple servants haul baskets of gourds, legumes, fish wrapped in rushes, and the ever-present bread loaves, some shaped like turtles, others like moons. A few are just blobs. You get the blobs. Of course, here's your first mainstream fact of the night. Mesopotamians were among the earliest people to bake bread in clay ovens, tanners shaped like inverted beehives. The ovens are already glowing in one corner, their tops open like little fiery mouths. A woman in soot-smeared robes yells at you not to block the draft. You move, swiftly. But here's a quirk. At feasts like this, it was considered a bad omen if the bread cracked in the oven. A good crack meant favor from the gods. A flat loaf could mean drought, or war, or someone forgot the ritual salt again. It's all very dramatic, and the head baker is definitely acting like the fate of rests on her sourdough. Meanwhile, the high priestess's steward, a man with eyebrows so long they probably get caught in doorways, strides in holding a list of duties written on a small, palm-sized clay tablet. He peers at you. You, yes, the one covered in flour. You're on dried fig unbundling. Don't mash them. That's the fish boy's job. You salute with fig-stained fingers and obey. The temple garden bustles like a festival. There are small fig trees, date palms strung with bronze bells, and clay jars buried halfway into the earth to keep wine cool. You pass a group of girls laying lotus petals along a woven mat where the high priestess will later sit. A musician sits cross-legged, whispering to her lyre as if it might betray her in front of the crowd. "Hey," she says, nodding at your fig-sticky hands. "You're lucky. Last time, I was on dung lamp duty. Ever tried lighting 30 oil lamps with donkey droppings? You hadn't, and frankly, you're okay never doing that." Over by the ziggurat wall, there's a group of boys daring each other to jump from the second tier of the structure into a pile of wheat chaff. One of them almost misses and earns a shouted curse that roughly translates to, "May your barley rot and your goats grow teeth in strange places." Oh, Mesopotamian insults, always creative. Historians still argue whether the ziggurat itself, visible towering beyond the garden, was a temple, an observatory, or just a very ambitious metaphor. Tonight, though, it's a glowing backdrop, catching the last rays of sunlight on its bitumen-plastered bricks. A golden line of torches begins to climb its slope, lit one by attendants in red robes. And you're sent to retrieve the holy jug. No, not that holy jug. The other one. The one with the lapis stopper shaped like a lion's head. Of course, no one tells you where it is. You stumble through a storage room packed with jars, dried fish, ceremonial pickles, and an extremely grumpy cat with one ear. Eventually, with help from an elderly servant named Gula, who insists on telling you about a dream she had where a frog turned into a star, you find the jug. Heavy, clay, inscribed, very likely cursed. You carry it back carefully, trying not to trip on the reed mats or get bumped by the barley dancers warming up near the canal. One slips and nearly plunges into the irrigation ditch. You catch him. He looks up, wipes a muddy cheek, and says, "If I survive tonight, I'm switching to music." You and me both, buddy. As evening rolls in, the garden smells of baking bread, roasting goat, and crushed mint. You spot a tablet scribe sketching tiny pictographs into fresh clay, carefully noting the items prepared for the feast. Not for taxes, just for tradition. Some of these scribes will record how many fish were served, how much wine was drunk, and even which guests ate too slowly. The goddess must be kept informed after all. You take a deep breath. Your back aches, your feet are dusty, and you've somehow managed to smear fig paste on your elbow. But as the lamps are lit one by one, and the garden takes on the glow of holy firelight, you can't help but feel it. This is more than dinner. It's a living ritual, one you're now part of, however sticky your hands may be. You're still sticky from the figs, but now you've been handed a bronze-toothed rake and told to groom the sacred paths. Which, yes, sounds a little ominous. Turns out, it's mostly just gently combing the gravel between narrow garden walkways. You try not to kick up too much dust. It gets in the honey-glazed turnips. The Garden of Ur isn't just a collection of plants and pots. It's a living diagram of cosmic order. Every cluster of trees, every curve of canal, even the flower beds that look haphazard, they're intentional. This place is geometry in bloom. You pause to admire a corner of the garden where flowering henna bushes form a perfect triangle, each point marked by a polished stone embedded with tiny copper studs. When the wind shifts, they glitter. It's not just pretty, it's a map. Garden as cosmogram, one scribe told you earlier, eyes gleaming, like someone who spent too much time indoors. Each turn of the walkway reflects a celestial body's arc. You nod, as if that makes sense. You're mostly focused on not raking over someone's sandals. The palm trees form a sort of canopy overhead, thick and rhythmic, their trunks wrapped with offerings. Palm fibers, dyed cloth. One. Is that a chicken foot? Best not to ask. Your fellow rake wielder, a gangly boy with sharp elbows, says, "It's all numbers, see? 3 rows for the gods, 4 for the stars, 5 for the underworld." You squint at the layout. 3, 4, 5. That actually is a right triangle. Ancient math nerds at it again. Mainstream fact time. The Mesopotamians were skilled mathematicians. Long before Pythagoras strolled onto the scene, scribes in were using base 60 systems to measure fields, tax grain, and align buildings. Your rake path? Likely drawn using a rope and peg method that could still shame your geometry homework. As you edge toward the central fountain, a shallow limestone bowl gurgling with sweet water, you nearly trip on a turtle. Just a turtle. Wearing a tiny reed necklace. A woman scoops it up and whispers to it, "No fountain for you tonight." Apparently, that's a thing. You're told to prune the pomegranates next. Easy enough, except these are sacred pomegranates. And if you clip the wrong branch, you risk invoking pestilence of unknown origin. The head gardener, a man with a nose like a battle axe, hands you a bronze sickle and says, "Cut only the left-leaning fruits. The others are watching." You snort. He's not joking. A fringe tidbit for your collection. Some Mesopotamian rituals involved assigning personality traits to trees. A leaning date palm might be considered melancholic, while a knotty fig was seen as warlike. Prune the wrong vibe? The wrong energy might follow you home. You now eye every fruit with suspicion. From your vantage point near the fig arches, you spot the scribe again. He's standing on a stool, sketching the garden from above like he's drafting for a real estate scroll. The tablet he's pressing into clay looks like a grid, each square filled with cuneiform. One glyph catches your eye, a star. Next to it, a symbol that looks suspiciously like a goose wearing a crown. He notices your confusion. It's a representation of the divine constellation known as the honking path. You raise an eyebrow. He nods solemnly. It guards the direction of feasting. You wouldn't want the seating to face a cursed star, would you? You decide to just say no. Definitely not. Historians still argue whether these symbolic garden layouts were purely religious or subtly scientific. Some say they functioned like sundials or moon phase calculators. Others insist they were simply designed to impress visiting dignitaries. You lean toward the second option, especially when you see a noblewoman pointing to a spiral of onions and saying, "Behold, the moon's tear." Your rake is swapped out for a set of clapper stones. Apparently, you now help chase off ill-tempered breezes. It involves standing under a sycamore and clicking the stones together in a rhythm meant to encourage balance. You're doing great until the wind actually picks up and your stones smack together too hard, startling a flock of ibises. They scatter. You drop the stones. No one sees. Hopefully. Around you, the garden teems with symbolism. Clay statues are tucked among the reeds, tiny godlings with wide eyes and looped arms. Each one represents an aspect of the feast: abundance, harmony, digestion. You pass one shaped like a duck cradling a spoon. You hope it's for digestion. A toddler sprints through the pomegranate grove with a garland of garlic bulbs, pursued by a woman yelling, "That's for the first tray, you little demon!" You press yourself against a banana tree to stay out of the way. This may be a sacred garden, but it's also pure chaos. Still, beauty sneaks in. The canal reflects the torchlight like a river of liquid gold. You notice water spilling over the edge of a channel, running deliberately into a flower bed shaped like a crescent. You ask the gardener if that's by design. He nods. That's the moon's drinking place. Obviously, your body aches from squatting to arrange clay jars around the iris bed, but you manage not to break anything or offend any minor deities. You overhear one of the elder priests mutter, "The layout is almost complete. Only the priestess can bless the final angle." You wonder what happens if the angle isn't quite right. Famine? Or just another raking session? There's a moment of stillness, just one. A single long breath in the garden, where even the crickets seem to hush. Lamps flicker softly, scribes murmur. A priest walks the path you just cleared, scattering flower petals behind him. His sandals make no sound. You feel the shift. The garden is no longer just a place to cook and gossip and trip over turtles. It's humming now, alive in a way you hadn't noticed before. Every stone seems placed for a reason. Every curve draws the eye upward, toward the ziggurat beyond, and the crescent moon rising above it. And you're standing at the heart of a geometric prayer, written in vines and clay and pomegranate roots. "Not bad," mutters the gardener beside you, tossing a final bundle of herbs onto a woven mat. "Could have used more symmetry, but the gods probably won't mind. Probably." You laugh, because that's all you can do. Then you step back and look again, not as a rake wielder, not as a guest, but as a piece of the pattern. The stars begin to blink on, and you swear, just faintly, that the fig trees are pointing the way to something else. By now, your hands are raw from fig stems and pomegranate bark, and your sandals have collected an alarming amount of onion husks. But you don't have time to whine about it. There's an actual goat staring at you, not a cute, bouncy baby goat. This is a broad-chested, sideways-glancing patriarch of a goat, with horns like twisted daggers and the gaze of someone who's seen things. His handler, a grizzled man missing exactly half an eyebrow, grins and says, "You're on scenting duty." You're handed a bundle of reeds dipped in scented oils and told to gently waft the fumes toward the goat. Not to perfume the animal. No, that would be ridiculous. You're enticing the spirit of the feast to settle in. Apparently, this goat will be led through the garden 3 times before being offered up at the main altar, or spared, depending on the priestess's dream reading. You waft gently. The goat sneezes. The handler chuckles ominously. You get the distinct impression that this job doesn't make it into the romantic scrolls about temple life. You follow as the goat begins its slow processional loop through the garden, head held high, bells jingling at its neck. All around you, people begin to fall into rhythm, some trailing incense burners, others dusting petals into the path. The procession isn't large, just enough to mark the beginning of sacred time. And now, the timing matters. The moon has risen another finger width above the ziggurat, and all activity is shifting gears. No more children running with garlic garlands. No more casual jokes about sacred geometry. You've entered the solemn hour. The head priestess appears from the gate pavilion, tall and luminous in her layered robes, lapis, copper-threaded linen, a belt of tiny bells that sound like wind chimes when she walks. Her crown is made of woven gold reeds, and she carries a staff topped with a crescent. You freeze. Everyone does. She raises her arms slowly, and in one fluid motion, the music begins. Not flutes or harps yet, just low drumming, like the heartbeat of itself. You can feel it in your chest. A shiver of vibration through the gravel path. Mainstream fact drop. Priestesses in ancient Sumer were not just ceremonial figureheads. Many held genuine political power and were educated astronomers, mathematicians, and poets. Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon, was a priestess in nearby Ur and is widely considered the world's first known author. Your priestess tonight? She walks like someone who edits starlight for grammar. The goat bows its head slightly as she passes. You're still holding the scented reeds. You waft, reverently this time. She stops near the central fountain, turns her gaze skyward, and whispers something you can't hear. A steward approaches with a wide stone dish. Inside, a tangle of cooked barley and glistening dates. She dips her fingers in, lifts a piece to her lips, and then, without eating, places it gently onto the ground. The first bite returns to the gods, the steward murmurs. Probably more for your benefit than hers. The goat is led away, and suddenly the garden erupts into movement. It's time to serve the first wave of dishes. You're shoved, gently but firmly, toward a line of clay trays stacked high with food. Spiced lentils, boiled fish, charred leeks wrapped in fig leaves, and bread, so much bread, in elaborate shapes you swear must be jokes. There's one that looks like a lion dancing, another like a winged temple guard. You're handed a tray with circular sun loaves. Just your luck. You carry them to the first mat, where 4 guests await, 2 priests, 1 scribe, and a woman with enough gold jewelry to fund a small war. They nod as you place the tray, but say nothing. One priest raises a single brow. You forgot the dipping oil. You run back. A young girl hands you a jug and whispers, "Don't mix up the oils. One's for blessing, one's for flavor. The difference is subtle. No pressure." You rush back with the jug of amber-colored liquid and carefully drizzle it over the loaves. The guests murmur in approval. The gold-laden woman snaps her fingers. You freeze. She points to a small tray of pickled garlic slices. You hand it over with the exaggerated smile of someone who narrowly avoided public execution. Fringe fact incoming. Some feasts in Ur included ritual insults as part of the entertainment. Guests would take turns reciting poetic taunts, sometimes aimed at each other, sometimes at symbolic figures, like the god of spilled soup or the one who drops cups. You wonder what title you've just earned. You rotate back to the kitchen area, or what passes for one. Fires burn low under terracotta domes. Servants move with terrifying speed. One woman with soot on her face is barking orders in a mixture of Akkadian and what might be ancient sarcasm. She points to a stack of flatbread and says, "Retoast." It cooled. That's an omen. You retoast. A man rushes by with a bowl of mashed chickpeas mixed with garlic, sesame, and mint. You nearly cry. It smells like something your modern stomach understands. A young boy dips his fingers in a pot of honey and flicks it 3 times toward the sky. "For Inanna," he says. "She likes sweets." He licks the rest off his fingers. I checked. Historians still argue whether the Inanna rites of Ur were strictly religious or secretly theatrical. The way the boy winked? You're starting to see how both could be true. There's music now. Lyres and flutes, soft and hypnotic, weaving through the lamplit air like vines. Dancers move slowly between the mats, arms extended, fingers trembling in elegant patterns. One of them spins, and as her veil flutters, she winks at you. You nearly drop a tray of mustard-glazed fish. Back at the prep area, you're assigned to tray ornamentation. That means placing decorative herbs, carved radish moons, and flower petals in auspicious configurations. There's a diagram. It looks like a board game designed by a meteorologist. You do your best. An old man beside you mutters, "Don't place parsley near mint. Bad juju." You believe him instantly. The moon is high now. The ziggurat looms like a stairway to the stars, and from its summit, someone begins to chant. You can't make out the words, but they ripple down the bricks like water. You pause, just for a moment. You look around. The trays, the dancers, the flickering torches, the low buzz of song and chewing and sacred whispers. The air is thick with aroma, smoke, garlic, rosewater, and something sharp and citrusy you can't place. Somewhere, a baby giggles. Somewhere else, a dog barks twice and is promptly shushed by a priestess. This isn't just dinner, it's an entire cosmology served on clay platters. You are, somehow, still the help. But you're here, in the Garden of Ur, with fig paste on your sleeve, a sacred triangle of radishes in your hand, and a front row seat to a rite as old as writing. Not bad for a night shift. You're starting to think the universe runs on chickpeas and sheer chaos. Just as you finally figured out how to place parsley without offending celestial geometry, someone yells, "It's time for the salt blessing." And suddenly you're being handed a polished obsidian bowl filled with, yes, salt. The fancy kind. It gleams like crushed pearls and smells faintly of sea wind, though you're a good 2 days' journey from the coast. Your instructions? Walk slowly along the water channels and drop a pinch at each bend while humming something gently holy. No pressure. Just hold your breath. Hum whatever feels vaguely spiritual. You land on a tuneless hum that suspiciously resembles the theme from Jeopardy and sprinkle away. The salt, you're told, anchors the feast to the earth. Without it, the food might float into the realm of dreams. Or rats. Depends who you ask. Along the narrow irrigation rills, you see the reflection of flickering torches. They stretch and ripple in the water like golden snakes. Someone's added floating lotus blossoms, though technically, those don't grow here. Imports, no doubt. The kind of flex only Ur can afford. You pass two women sitting cross-legged by a copper urn, preparing a paste of dates, tamarind, and fermented fish. They're gossiping loudly. One leans toward the other and says, "He brought raw lentils." Like they won't know. It's the priestess's teeth we're talking about. You file that away under festive fatal mistakes. Mainstream fact? Salt was not only precious in Mesopotamia, it was a literal currency. Workers were sometimes paid in it, and temples often controlled production. The phrase, "worth your salt," these folks invented it. The pastemakers spot you. One calls, "You with the holy salt, come taste this." It'll make your ancestors dance. You hesitate, but hey, free snack. You dip a pinky in. It tastes like a sunrise slapped you. Sweet, sharp, vaguely fishy, and then warm and spicy on the tail end. You cough once. They cheer. "Leave some for the gods next time," one says, tossing you a fig as you move on. You complete your salt circuit and return the bowl to a stone pedestal guarded by a clay lion. Not a real one, but it feels like it might pounce if you forget to bow. You bow, just in case. You're intercepted by an older scribe who hands you a wax tablet. "Help me carry the guest list," he says, which is an odd request since it's literally one tablet. But then he reveals 5 more, strapped to his belt like a scholar's utility kit. He explains each guest's placement is not arbitrary. It's based on lineage, temple affiliations, astrological signs, and which deity sponsored their last offering. One woman, a brewer's daughter, was bumped 3 cushions forward after sacrificing a fat duck to Nanshi, goddess of divination and fresh water. You peek at a tablet. It's a mess of names, gods, and little pictograms. One looks like a man running with a fish under each arm. The scribe shrugs. Family crest. You walk with him as he double-checks the mats and murmurs updates. She's seated next to the lamplighter again. She won't like that. He smells of goat tallow. You try not to laugh, and mostly fail. As you pass a central table, someone grabs your wrist. It's a boy, maybe 10, face smeared with lentil paste, grinning wildly. Do you want to see the puppet show? He asks, pulling you toward a small stage made of palm fronds and clay bricks. You expect something childish, but the show is deeply strange. A clay puppet shaped like a goat argues with a puppet shaped like a tree. There's a long debate about whether goats can be reincarnated as barley. A third puppet, a star with googly eyes, declares, only if they remember the sacred scent. You look around. No one is laughing. They're watching with reverence. The scribe leans over and whispers, that's the Feast of Echoes. The goat represents us. The tree is memory. The star, well, historians still argue whether the star is fate or just seasonal weather. The puppeteer bows at the end. The crowd claps once, in unison. You do too, just to be safe. You're pulled next into the wine line. Not to drink. No. You're on grape duty now. You hand out small clay cups, carefully poured with watered wine infused with spices, cinnamon, dried pomegranate, and something they won't name. If we told you, one steward grins, you'd dream of the wrong future. Fringe fact time. The Mesopotamians flavored their wines not only for taste, but for dream influence. Some herbs were said to invoke visions of ancestors, others to encourage romantic dreams, or even, if used carefully, visions of divine judgment. You sip a drop, just to check. It tastes like wood smoke and spring rain. At the center of the feast, a large platter is unveiled with dramatic flair. A whole roasted carp wrapped in banana leaves, glazed with date syrup, and surrounded by boiled quail eggs. A young man recites a poem to the fish. It's awkward. The fish has been decapitated. More music now, percussion and strings. The dancers return, this time in pairs, tracing wide loops between the mats. You notice their movements echo the garden's geometry. Circles, angles, back steps in triangle formation. One dancer's veil brushes your arm. You flinch, then feel oddly honored. Someone shouts, "The rice pyramids are collapsing!" and 3 people sprint toward a table at the north corner. You catch a glimpse. Yes, actual pyramids of rice, carefully molded and dyed with turmeric and saffron. A goat has somehow nudged one. The priest beside it sighs and mutters. The omens are becoming very literal. The music hushes for a moment. The head priestess rises. She lifts a small torch, walks to the fountain, and lights a floating lamp inside it. A dozen more are gently placed into the water, their flames flickering on the dark surface. And then she speaks. Not loudly, but her voice carries. She says something in an old form of Sumerian. You recognize maybe 4 words: light, grain, joy, and something that might mean belly. The crowd repeats the final phrase. It echoes low and steady, like a heartbeat. Ezida, the house of the true seed. You feel it in your spine. Maybe it's just the music. Maybe it's the fig paste. But you're somewhere between a night garden and a dream. Somewhere between real and ritual. The goat, now surprisingly docile, curls beside a small boy and is offered half a flatbread. You sit, finally, near the fountain's edge. Someone places a honey cake in your hand. It's shaped like a crescent, still warm. You don't ask questions anymore. The stars have fully emerged now. The Big Dipper tilts just above the ziggurat. The moon leans low, watching. And you're salted, scented, full of lentils and old stories. You're part of the feast. You are not hallucinating. The lamps on the water just blinked in unison. It's not fireflies. There's no wind. But as you sit at the fountain's edge with half a honey cake and your fingers sticky with date glaze, the little flames float out toward the edges of the channel like they're responding to a song only they can hear. A woman beside you whispers, "They follow breath." If enough people exhale together, they drift. You're about to ask if that's science or sacred mystery when she adds, "But if they go against the breeze, that means the gods are listening." You hold your breath. The lamps drift east toward the ziggurat. The priestess is gone from view now, her torch extinguished, replaced by a line of acolytes bearing trays stacked high with golden figs and dyed almonds. Behind them, a singer begins a long, trembling note. It's so high-pitched, you think it might be the sound of a reed bending in the wind, until the second note joins and the two spiral together like smoke. Here comes the next wave, the recitation of guest boasts. You're handed a bronze triangle and told to gong every time someone lies. This seems like an invitation for chaos, but the tradition is sacred. Each honored guest must rise, declare what they've contributed to the feast, and, here's the kicker, what divine omen it represents. The first speaker, a brewer, stands and declares, "I brought fermented barley with wormwood to honor Ninkasi, goddess of beer. May her bubbles never sour." He pauses for effect. "And I dreamt last night of a goat eating the moon." Murmurs rise. That could mean harvest luck or war. Interpretations are, generously, flexible. The next speaker is a merchant. She raises her cup and proclaims, "I imported black salt from the mountains and traded a sapphire to get it through the gate. It smells like thunder." She pauses, eyes glinting. "A hawk followed me the entire way. We arrived at dusk. His wings cast no shadow." She sits. No one gongs. The third guest stumbles a bit. Claims he brought many jars of chickpeas. Someone gongs. He flushes and adds, "Also, a poem for Inanna." The gong rings twice more. You kind of feel bad for him. Mainstream history fact. Ancient Mesopotamian feasts often included formal declarations of offering, akin to public speeches. These were partly religious devotion, partly social flex, and partly a test of memory and wit, especially under the influence of fermented date wine. You keep your gonging subtle. You're not here to start diplomatic incidents. Still, you notice that one acolyte near the back seems to keep a quiet tally on a wax board. Maybe there's a prize for least believable boast. Fringe tidbit time. There's some evidence that dream boasting was used to justify almost anything, from proposing new taxes to rearranging temple statuary. If someone claimed they saw the goddess Nisaba riding a turtle in their sleep, that might actually pass as legislative inspiration. The line between vision and negotiation. Paper thin. A child, probably about 6, stands uninvited and declares he offered a beetle to the fire god Gibble so he'd stop making my dad's feet stink. The crowd bursts into laughter, then applauds. You do too. Gongs stay mercifully silent. As the boasting winds down, attention shifts to the central display, the moon altar. You didn't notice it being built, which is its own kind of magic. It's made of packed clay, shaped like a spiral galaxy, with tiny oil lamps at each curve, and in the center, a shallow bowl of silvery liquid. Mercury? Liquid tin. Someone mutters river mirror, which is probably poetic, not literal. Suddenly, the air changes. A dry breeze whispers through the garden. Every lamp flickers once. The head priestess returns, this time wearing a veil so thin it looks like woven starlight. Her hands are painted blue to the elbow. She walks barefoot now, stepping only on the stone inlays that mark the 7 sacred constellations. Everyone lowers their heads. She raises a small wand of ivory, carved with spirals, and murmurs words you recognize only vaguely. Z, N, Na, N, Usal. You think that might be something like, breath of heaven, enter the bowl. Or maybe, bring the leftovers to the temple fridge. It's unclear. She dips the wand into the silver bowl and draws a perfect circle in the air. As she moves, a soft shimmer trails behind it, catching the torchlight in strange angles. Some say that's just the oil smoke, a steward murmurs. Others say it's a doorway. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian ritual symbols were meant to invoke literal portals between worlds, between seasons, between memory and time. Tonight, your team portal. Then abruptly, a sudden sharp crack. One of the fig trees sheds a branch with no warning. It crashes to the ground near the rice pyramid table. The goat bolts. The same priest mutters, very literal. Everyone freezes. The priestess turns. She steps slowly to the fallen branch and picks up a single fig still attached. She raises it high. The crowd lets out a long breath. Then applause. Disaster averted. It was a fig omen, not a death omen. Lucky. You're hustled back into action. Now it's time for lamp fruit. You blink. Someone presses a tray into your arms. It holds small fruits, some figs, some small pomegranates, each one pierced with a single glowing incense stick. The idea, apparently, is to light the garden with edible offerings. Guests place them near their mats as a sort of illumination spell. There's no real instruction on what to do if your fruit topples and the incense burns your mat. You improvise with a nearby pebble. The gods will understand. You manage to place all 10 lamp fruits without igniting any personal items, which is starting to feel like a major life achievement. Just when you think you might sneak a moment of rest, you're tapped by a girl holding a tiny flute. She points to your belt. You've got the key, she says. The key? You realize you're still wearing the guest list scribe's wax tablet harness. One of the cords is shaped into a knot, the key to the final procession. You nod solemnly, like you definitely meant to do that. The girl smiles and hands you a folded linen strip painted with spirals. Tie it to the eastern fig tree, she says. It marks the turning. The turning? You follow a curved path, past guests now lounging lazily, chewing honey-soaked barley and murmuring half-drunken prayers. You reach the fig tree just as the moon hits its highest point above the ziggurat. You tie the linen with shaky fingers. Behind you, a conch sounds. It's the signal. The turning of the feast has begun. All guests stand, some with groans, some with grace, and turn to face the moon. A chant rises slowly. One word, repeated again and again. You think it might be Usumgal, or maybe Namu. Either way, it buzzes through your ribs. A second line of dancers enters, this time older ones. Men and women with white-painted hands and robes trailing dust. They move slowly, deliberately, circling the garden 3 times. You watch from the fig tree's shadow, heart full of barley and ancient echoes. Somehow, you're not just watching anymore. You belong to the night now, to this impossible garden of Ur, to the laughter, the flames, the salted pathways, and the figs that fall like signs from the stars. You really didn't think there'd be this much shouting involved in a sacred feast, but here you are, watching three men argue over whether the moon's shadow just touched the wrong fig tree. You're not sure what the correct fig tree is, or what happens if the moon picks the wrong one, but one of the elders is gesturing dramatically with a carved spoon, while another points furiously at a line of cracked pottery shards arranged like breadcrumbs along the garden's northern edge. The head priestess says nothing. She just hums a single low note. Instantly, silence falls like a dropped curtain. Crisis averted. Fig tree forgiven. As you make your way back toward the fountain, the dancers are finishing their third and final loop. Their movements have slowed, robes dragging in the dust, arms rising and falling like waves at low tide. With each step, they scatter something. Tiny seeds, maybe? You catch a handful. Lentils. Of course. A child dashes past you with a firefly in a clay cup. "It blinked 3 times," he shouts, holding it aloft like an omen. That means Enlil is definitely listening. You don't know if that's true, but you nod anyway. Nearby, a group of elders has formed a semicircle around a storyteller. You join the edge of the crowd just as he begins. So, there was once a king who tried to measure the ziggurat's shadow with his own foot. The story spirals from there. Part lesson, part comedy, part flat-out nonsense. The king keeps tripping over turtles, gets cursed by a river spirit, and eventually finds enlightenment by living inside a clay pot for 3 lunar cycles. One audience member falls asleep. Another laughs so hard she spills her apricot wine on a scribe's lap. Mainstream fact: Mesopotamian storytelling often mixed myth and satire. Clay tablets even record parables involving talking animals, slapstick gags, and divine irony. Humor wasn't separate from spirituality. It was one of its tools. As the story ends, the king marries a starfish, don't ask. The priestess gestures, and the music resumes. This time, it's different. Flutes, yes, but also these deep, slow drums that sound like they were carved straight out of a mountain. The guests begin reseating themselves in a new formation, concentric circles now. It's the second seating of the feast, the sacred spiral. You're told it represents unity, transformation, and the digestive cycle, especially the digestive cycle. This round is all about stews. Fragrant, bubbling pots are carried in on bronze tripods. Each one smells like half the world collapsed into a bowl. Lamb and leeks, lentils and garlic, dried citrus peel, and wild herbs. One stew has floating slices of quail egg and what looks suspiciously like fig jam. Another smells like firewood and clove. You're handed a shallow dish and pointed toward the northeast quadrant, the guest of guests section. It seems your service in the lamp fruit line earned you a seat upgrade. Either that, or you're the unwitting sacrifice. A bearded man with a 7-strand braid leans over and whispers, "This stew's so sacred we don't name it. We just feel it." You take a bite. It tastes like a memory you didn't know you had. Something warm, something old. Maybe your ancestors knew this flavor. Someone nearby mumbles, "Tastes like the winter we traded goats for onions." Another nods. "Better than the year of dust. That stew tasted like bad choices." Then, without warning, the music stops again. A tall woman in a copper-studded robe stands and raises a clay bell. She rings it once, and just like that, the trial of tastes begins. Here's the rule. One guest must volunteer a taste memory that no one else at the feast can match. If someone can name the same flavor, the challenger must pass them their wine. It's weirdly cutthroat. The first challenger is the fig boy. He announces, I once ate a dried plum that had been blessed by a traveling priest from Marie and soaked in beer for 3 days. 3 hands go up immediately. He surrenders his cup with dramatic flair. Next, a baker. Goat cheese wrapped in rose petals and buried under sand for a moon cycle. Only one person claims that one. Apparently it's a fertility ritual from Lagash. Then, your turn. Everyone stares. You panic a little. Then you say, once, I licked date syrup off a salt tablet during a drought, and it tasted like thunder. The group falls silent. One person narrows their eyes, then shakes their head. Another mutters, thunder's a hard flavor to get right. Victory. You keep your wine. Fringe tidbit. Ancient Mesopotamians often held flavor and scent competitions. Scribes recorded ingredient combinations and even flavor poems detailing the emotional or symbolic meanings of particular dishes, like plum for sorrow, garlic for courage, and onion for revelation. As the trial ends, the guests settle into what one old man calls the belly hour. They lean back, laugh softly, murmur gossip. Someone sings a quiet lullaby in Sumerian. You drift. But the garden does not sleep. A quiet rustling begins. First it's the reeds, then the fig leaves, then the stones underfoot seem to click softly into place. From the west, acolytes emerge again, this time in silence. They carry bowls of fine sand and scatter them in deliberate spirals on the ground. The woman next to you says, dream paths. We'll walk them soon. You ask, where do they go? She shrugs. Depends on who's dreaming. A slight tremble runs through the ground. Probably nothing. Possibly something. You catch a glimpse of the ziggurat in the distance. Torches climb its spiral, as if the gods themselves are ascending. Historians still debate whether ziggurats were used for astronomical readings, ceremonial ascents, or merely as platforms to elevate offerings closer to the heavens. Tonight, you believe all three. A whispering voice calls you toward the spiral paths. You rise. The sand is cool beneath your feet. The spirals seem simple, until you realize they fold in on themselves, doubling back, looping you not around but through. Each step you take echoes like two. One now, one from the past. Somewhere within the garden, someone is singing about rain. Somewhere beyond it, someone is dancing inside a temple you'll never see. And here you are, in the place between. Not quite sleeping, not quite waking. Surrounded by lamps and lentils and laughter. And the moon, still full, still high, watching you with quiet approval. You don't remember falling asleep, but you're definitely dreaming now. You're standing at the center of the garden, though it looks different, softer, like it's been drawn in wet clay. The air is thick with sandalwood and ash. The moon is bigger, almost close enough to touch, and the fig trees sway to a rhythm you can't hear, but somehow feel in your ribs. The spirals in the sand are glowing, and when you look down, your feet are leaving no prints at all. A tall man in a robe shaped like a column of cuneiform script walks past you, humming. He carries a bowl, but it's filled with black feathers instead of stew. A child with a clay mask of a lion chases him, laughing soundlessly. Neither of them seem particularly interested in physics. Someone nearby, a woman maybe, her hair twisted like rope, says, "This is the garden's second form. It's older than the ziggurat." You turn to ask what she means, but she's vanished. Only a jar remains, sealed with wax and stamped with the mark of Enki. You reach for it, of course. The moment you do, everything flickers. You're back. Kind of. Your eyes flutter open to the real garden, the present garden, if that word even means anything anymore. The fig trees are still. The guests are murmuring. A new sound rises, slow and deep, the rhythm of clay drums beaten with wrapped fingers. This is the dream hour. A hush has settled, as if even the insects are holding their breath. You're handed a soft square of woven reed, a sleeping mat. Everyone gets one. The intention is clear. Eat, sing, speak, dream. You nestle in between two low lanterns, each glowing with pale resin. Somewhere above, the stars have shifted. Orion's belt tilts just a little further to the east. Someone points and says, "That's not Orion. That's the plow." Mainstream historical note. Mesopotamians tracked over 5,000 years of astronomical data. Their star catalogs predate Greek constellations, and their names for celestial bodies, like the plow, the furrow, or the true shepherd, link the heavens directly to agriculture, power, and the sacred calendar. Then, without warning, a voice rises. A woman begins chanting a poem older than any alphabet. You recognize only fragments. Words like water, stone, sister, serpent. This is the rite of night walking. Each guest must whisper a truth into the dark, not aloud. Into the dirt, you're not exempt. You lean close to the warm garden soil. It smells of figs, fire, and something older, something metallic. You whisper, "I once pretended to forget a name I loved." The dirt does not respond. It doesn't need to. From somewhere behind you, a man mutters, "I traded my brother's cloak for an omen. It was a bad one." From the other side, "I kissed the moon through a bowl of wine." You're pretty sure that last one was metaphorical. Fringe tidbit. Archaeologists have uncovered tiny tablets with one-line confessions, offerings, or curses buried in gardens or temple courtyards. Some were poetic, others petty. One simply read, "I hope his goats get worms." Classic. Suddenly soft steps near the ziggurat catch your ear. Figures in white descend from its winding path. You realize they've been up there all night, waiting. Their hands are empty, their eyes closed. They are the star counters, and it's time for the naming. This part of the feast happens only during a full moon, when the barley harvest is strong. The river hasn't flooded early, and the dream paths haven't been broken by footprints. So, rare. You sit up straighter. Everyone does. One by one, the star counters call out a name, not of people, but of moments. A voice calls, "The tilted cup." A small group claps. Another, "Moon over lentil oil." A chuckle rises. You're told that if your night contained that moment, if you lived it, however briefly, you may raise your hand and be counted. Someone announces, "The goat that would not leave." More laughter. Even the goat bleats from somewhere in the garden shadows. Then, the taste of thunder. Your eyes widen. That's your line. From the stew trial, you raise your hand. An acolyte silently hands you a tiny carved bead, a reward for being named. You rub it between your fingers. It smells faintly of nutmeg and smoke. Historians still debate whether the naming was ceremonial or mnemonic, a way to encode the events of communal feasts into oral history. Some believe it was how memories became myths. Either way, you're part of it now. The night deepens. Lanterns are doused one by one. The garden dims into near darkness, except for the silver stretch of moonlight across the central fountain. And then, like a soft breeze, The priestess begins the final song. It's not in any language you recognize. It sounds more like water spilling in slow motion or leaves brushing against marble. Still, it vibrates in your chest like a lullaby meant for bones. No one moves, no one speaks. The garden hums with a silence so full it feels holy. When the song ends, you're not sure whether a minute or an hour has passed. It doesn't matter. Someone claps, then another, and suddenly the whole garden is alive again, soft, laughing, stretching, sipping the last of the wine, brushing ash from their robes. The feast is not over. There's still the procession to come, the final one. You see them assembling now, guests holding clay vessels filled with water from the fountain, marked with wax seals stamped with the sign of Nana, the moon god. These are offerings for the river. You're handed one too. A young boy explains, "It's how we tell the tigress what we saw." You don't ask what happens if the river disagrees. You just hold your bowl, feel its weight, and step in line with the others. Together, you move out of the garden, past the rows of fig trees, the last of the lamp fruit smoldering, and down the soft, worn steps toward the riverbanks. The city is silent. The ziggurat looms behind you like a slumbering colossus. At the water's edge, one by one, guests kneel and pour their bowls into the river. The current takes each offering, pulls it into the vast body of memory and time and tide. Your turn. You kneel. You pour. You whisper nothing, but the river hears anyway. And just as you stand, the wind picks up. Not strong, not fierce, just enough to carry the scent of figs and fire and barley one last time across the midnight. The garden may sleep now, but you'll carry this night forever. You're back in the garden, though now it feels like the end of a very strange play where everyone is too full to stand and too enchanted to leave. The procession down to the river is done. The offerings have flowed into the Tigris, and yet somehow no one's actually going home. They've returned instead to low cushions and half-finished plates, to wine-stained lips and crumb-freckled fingers. The second son of the Mesopotamian feast, the kind that rises after the rituals, glows gently in the form of flickering torches and clay hearths. It's now what the priestess calls the hour of laughing gods. You're not exactly sure which gods those are. Enki seems like a trickster, and Ishtar has her moods. But apparently they like riddles, tall tales, and anything that makes people spill their drink from laughing too hard. The priestess herself leans over and whispers, "If anyone asks, I never fell into the lentil pot last year. Never happened." Then she winks. A scribe in elaborate shoulder tassels stands up and announces the riddle contest with a grand flourish of a reed stylus. The rules? Simple. Stump the group or get gently mocked for eternity. Someone starts, "What has no feet, no hands, no voice, but can open any gate?" Answers are thrown like pomegranate seeds. The wind? A whisper? A badly written omen? The actual answer? Time. Mild groans. One person throws a fig. Mainstream fact, riddles were a favorite pastime in ancient Mesopotamia, appearing in both educational texts and entertainment. Some riddles were didactic, others bawdy, and a few were so obscure that modern scholars still can't solve them. Imagine losing sleep over a 4,000-year-old joke. You're goaded into trying one. You panic. Then you say, "I follow the feast, but I'm never invited to eat. I wear the scent of every stew, but taste none. What am I?" Gasps, blinking, silence. Finally, a child whispers, "The smoke." They're right, of course. But the scribe gasps and yells, "A prodigy! This child must be an avatar of Nabu. The crowd erupts. The child is lifted in the air, beaming, and given a crown made of braided scallion leaves. You wonder if anyone will remember this tomorrow, or if it'll already have turned to myth. Then unexpectedly, a new figure enters the garden. Not a guest, not a priest, not even a goat. It's an oracle. She wears a robe stitched with mirrors and carries a jug on her back. Her eyelids are painted silver, and she walks like she's halfway between dancing and floating. The crowd parts without a word. She stops at the fountain, reaches into her jug, and pours out a single thread of deep blue ink into the water. The surface ripples, then settles. She dips her fingers and begins to speak. The stars have told of a guest not from here, one who walks with questions, one who tasted thunder. Oh, great, that's you again. Everyone slowly turns toward you. The fig kid is already pointing. The oracle smiles, kindly, maybe a little mischievously, and gestures for you to approach. You do. Heart pounding. She holds out a clay token. It bears a symbol that looks like a triangle with wings. She says, "This is the mark of travelers between stories." Cool, no pressure. Fringe tidbit. Mesopotamian myths often featured story travelers, figures who appear in one tale, vanish, and reappear centuries later in another, often under different names, but bearing the same token or fate. Scholars still debate whether these were symbolic placeholders or the ancient version of crossover characters. The oracle waves her hand, and the crowd returns to its lounging and storytelling as if nothing had happened. You sit back down, staring at the token. A woman beside you says, "Don't lose it. You'll need it when the river dreams again." You're not sure what that means, but you wrap the token in your sleeve anyway. At this point in the evening, or morning, the food returns in one final wave. Not dishes, just snacks. Tiny things. Honeyed walnuts, pickled dates, slices of barley bread with goat's butter. A drink made of sour milk and tamarind, strangely addictive. You find yourself chewing on something that turns out to be candied squash. It's better than you expect. A man offers you a rolled scroll. "Fortune cookie?" he jokes. You laugh, then unroll it. Inside is a cuneiform symbol. You don't recognize it, but someone nearby squints and says, "That's the sign for reminder." Helpful. Historians still argue whether such message tokens were part of fortune-telling, mnemonic tools, or simply entertainment. Some believe scribes used them to teach moral lessons under the guise of fun, because nothing makes morality go down smoother than goat cheese and mystery symbols. The drums return. Quiet this time. A single handbeat, like a heartbeat, and the garden slowly begins to shed its layers. The great carpets are rolled up by silent figures. The tables are folded. The final wineskins are emptied. Clay vessels are stacked, kissed with ash, and taken to the temple ovens to be cleansed. But the people linger. They tell last stories, the ones you only tell when the night is too long to ignore, but too short to keep. One woman admits she once stole a plum from the high priestess and planted the seed behind a wall. Another says she carved a love poem into the inside of a donkey's saddle and rode it halfway to Babylon before losing her nerve. You're asked to tell one too. You hesitate. Then softly, you say, "One time I dreamed of a garden I had never seen. And when I arrived, everything already knew me." Everyone nods. That's the best kind of story. The kind that sounds impossible, but lands like a memory. The priestess claps once, and a hush falls. She says, "We will close the garden now." People stand, stretch, yawn. Some giggle. One man accidentally steps into the fountain, splashes everywhere, and declares himself blessed anew. The guests begin to exit through the same reed gate you entered earlier, now hung with dried herbs and chalk symbols. You step toward it, the wrapped token still warm in your hand. Before you leave, the priestess touches your shoulder. Next time, she says, bring a question. You nod, not sure if she means next feast, next lifetime, or next dream. Does it matter? You step outside. The night air is cooler now. The stars are fading. A single bird sings somewhere to the east. The garden is quiet behind you, but inside you can still hear laughter. And stew, always stew. You walk a little slower now. Not because you're tired, though sure, the stew coma is real, but because the air tastes different out here. It's thinner, quieter, less perfumed, more honest. You're in the outer ring of now, the city's edge, just beyond the scent of charcoal and fig wood, beyond the stone courtyards and ziggurat shadow, is where the night exhales. You glance back at the garden. From here, it's just a faint golden glow behind a row of palms. No music, no laughter. Just the soft suggestion that something magical happened and you were there for it. You've still got the clay token, still wrapped, still warm, like it remembers more than it should. A few guests walk alongside you in silence. There's a shared understanding, no small talk. No, wasn't that wild? Or, best goat cheese of my life. Just footsteps, rhythmic and grounded. A kind of quiet procession into the world again. Then someone breaks the silence. A young boy, maybe 10, wearing a wreath made from scallion tops and sesame pods. I think I dreamed while I was awake, he says. An old man next to him snorts. First time? They all laugh. Not the garden's rich, echoing laughter, but a smaller, simpler version. A human laugh outside the spell. You come to a well near a crumbling gate. Someone dips a bucket. The water's cool, brackish, refreshing in that this is probably 20% river mud kind of way. You take a sip anyway. Mainstream fact. Wells at the edge of ancient Mesopotamian cities often doubled as communal gathering spots. Messages were left on shards of pottery, offering updates or gossip. One such shard found near reads simply, "He lied about the fish." Honestly, still relatable. The group begins to drift, each person peeling away, toward homes, boats, courtyards, or sleeping mats rolled beside hearths. But you linger, because the ziggurat's still watching you. It hasn't moved, obviously. Still hulking, still stone, still older than your sense of time. But now, you're seeing it differently. It's glowing, just faintly, from within. And somehow, you know that there are people still inside it, still watching. Not in a creepy way, though. A little creepy. More like a custodianship. They're tending the memory of the night. You walk back toward it, not all the way, just enough to see the steps better. They're uneven, worn by countless feet. You remember walking them earlier, before the feast. The scratch of your sandals on the stone, the smell of the torches. You touch the first step. It's warm. A voice, casual as a neighbor, says, "You coming back next season?" You blink. It's the fig thief. He's perched on a low wall, barefoot, half-eaten date in hand. "Season?" you ask. He grins. Feasts are seasonal, not the barley calendar, the story calendar. You stare. He shrugs. Some gardens only open when the plot's ready, you'll see. Then he hops down, pats your shoulder like an old friend, and wanders off into the dark. Fringe tidbit. Some Babylonian calendars tracked not just time and agriculture, but mythic alignment, ritual timing based on celestial symbolism, dreams, or omens. Entire rituals could be postponed if the story signs didn't match. Kind of like calling off a wedding because Mercury's in retrograde, but 3,000 years earlier and with more liver readings. You're standing there still, trying to decide whether to feel amazed or just very sleep deprived. When something rustles behind you, you turn. A woman in a robe of reeds and linen is carrying a bundle of scrolls. Her hair is streaked with ash. She moves with the ease of someone who spent their whole life walking between important places. You drop this, she says. She holds out a second clay token, but this one is cracked. You look down at the one you already have, still wrapped, intact. You hold them side by side. Yours, triangle with wings. Hers, circle with a line through it. She leans closer and whispers, "That one's your memory. This one's your question." You blink. "Which one do I keep?" you ask. She tilts her head. "Both, if you're clever." Then she tucks the broken token into your sleeve and walks away before you can formulate anything resembling a follow-up question. Historians still argue whether tokens and talismans were literal keys to ritual participation or metaphorical storytelling devices used by priesthoods to encode cultural memory. Some claim they were trading tools. Others see them as early psychological anchors, portable emotion memory tech. You sit on the low wall and breathe. The night's softening now. You can feel it. The kind of quiet that isn't just about volume. It's about space. Between thoughts. Between heartbeats. You unwrap your original token and hold it up to the moonlight. The mark catches the glow. For a moment, it almost looks like it's moving. Spinning. Slowly. You think of the stew, of the ziggurat steps, of the river, swallowing secrets in the dark. You think of the taste of thunder, the fig trees, the child's riddle, the priestess's laugh, and then you don't think at all. You just feel it, all of it, layered into your skin like dust and ash and wind. Eventually, you rise. The garden's truly asleep now. The lamps are gone. The laughter has curled into silence. Even the goats seem less chaotic. You don't say goodbye. Not to the garden. Not to the ziggurat. Not even to the fig thief. You just walk. And somewhere along that dusty, starlit path, between the memory you hold and the question you now carry, you begin to understand something that can't quite be said out loud, and probably shouldn't be. Because some stories aren't about telling. They're about tasting, like thunder. The air has changed again, cooler now, carrying a hint of dawn and something faintly sweet, like crushed dates mixed with wild thyme. You keep walking, the city's silhouette shrinking behind you, the ziggurat standing like an ancient sentinel, watching over its people and stories. Your feet tread the cracked mud paths, where traders once shuffled, where children chased clay pigeons and laughter spilled into the dust. You remember the stories you heard, the fig theft, the riddles, the oracle's cryptic message, and they feel less like isolated moments and more like threads weaving through a tapestry that's still unfolding. The token in your hand is warm, pulsing almost, as if it contains a heartbeat, a reminder that stories carry life, and life is carried by stories. You pause by the riverbank, where the tigress whispers its endless song. The water glints like scattered jewels, reflecting the first shy blush of morning. A breeze stirs the date palms, their fronds rustling a soft lullaby. You breathe it in deeply, the earthiness of soil, the sweetness of fruit, the faint tang of river water mixing with morning mist. Mainstream fact: the rivers Tigris and Euphrates were lifelines of Mesopotamia, not only for irrigation, but as vital trade routes and cultural arteries. They shaped the rhythms of daily life and the flow of stories, myths, and dreams. You sink down onto a sun-warmed stone, letting the moment stretch. The garden's feast is over. The laughter faded, but the echoes remain, like embers glowing beneath the ash. You think about the feast's odd mix of sacred rituals and messy human moments. The priestess's chants, the children's games, the drunken confessions, the riddles. You realize that these were not just distractions, but deliberate acts of connection between gods and mortals, past and present, order and chaos. The broken token hidden in your sleeve feels heavier now. You wonder about its story, whose memory it holds, what question it carries. Fringe tidbit: some scholars speculate that broken tokens symbolize the incomplete nature of human understanding, serving as physical reminders that some mysteries are meant to remain unanswered, keeping the sacred alive through curiosity. You look up at the sky, now streaked with pink and gold. The stars are retreating, but one faint light lingers: Venus, the morning star, goddess Ishtar's emblem. You smile, thinking of the feast's final riddle, the oracle's words, and the invitation to bring a question next time. Maybe the journey isn't about answers at all. Maybe it's about showing up, being present, tasting the thunder. You close your eyes and listen. The river hums. The palms whisper. Your heartbeat syncs with the ancient pulse of Ur. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of waking, the garden waits, ready to bloom again. The night's stories have settled, like soft sediment in a slow-moving river. You feel the weight of the feast lifting from your shoulders, a gentle easing, like a warm cloak folding around you. The world blurs into soft shapes and colors, the sharp edges of day melting into the quiet palette of dreams. You imagine the garden under moonlight, the ziggurat's shadow long and calm, the last embers of fire flickering low. In this calm, you find a breath, a pause, a moment where time stretches and all the noise falls away. It's in this quiet space that the stories live, not just in words, but in the silence between them. So, before you drift off, carry this with you. Every story is a journey, every question, a gift. And sometimes, the most important part is simply to be there, to taste the thunder. Good night, traveler. End of script. Sweet dreams.